Should be rolling. All right, what's up, everybody? Hopefully we're rolling with zero technical difficulties. Welcome to the first interactive Bodybuilding.com Ask the Pro panel. My name is Chris Ullery. I'm the deputy editor here. I also have the distinct honor and privilege to be your moderator today. We've got some awesome people on the pro panel. It's a pleasure having them here. To my left, Dr. Jake Wilson, Ph.D. skeletal muscle physiology, also a CSCS. And to my right, Dr. Rob Wildman, excuse me, Rob Wildman, who's a Ph.D. nutritionist. And behind me is the lovely Ashley Conrad, who's a celebrity trainer and also the founder of Clutch Supplements. So we've got a lot of incoming questions here from users on Google Hangout as well as YouTube. I'm going to step to the side so I can start picking out the most popular. Just let these guys run wild, and we're extremely excited to hang out with you for the next hour. So as I step out, despite that brief introduction, maybe you guys can kind of introduce your day-to-day a little bit so the audience can get to know you, and we'll rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Chris said, my name is Jacob Wilson, and actually run the Human Performance Laboratory at University of Tampa. So basically our specialty 24/7 is studying how to help people gain muscle, how to help people lose fat. You know, basically we're pushing the limits of human performance and body composition every single day. So it's, you know, definitely like a dream job. Rob?
Yeah, hey, Dr. Rob Wildman. I am the Chief Science Officer for Diametize Nutrition in beautiful Dallas, Texas. I believe I have the dream job. I get to formulate products and spearhead research and all scientific directions for Diametize, a global sport nutrition brand. So great to be here. Looking forward to interacting.
I'm Ashley Conrad. I'm a celebrity trainer and the founder of Clutch Body Shop. Started my career based on major celebrity transformations in Hollywood, and so that was kind of the start to my career, and now my day-to-day is really running Clutch Supplements, which is on Bodybuilding.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here, and thank you to the viewers for being here as well. We're going to get started with the most popular questions that have been upvoted by people on Google Hangout. So this one is from Claudia Giraldo. Stellar question. The days I do not exercise, should I keep taking my supplements, such as casein at night, BCAAs, glutamine, whey, and any others?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, we think about it like this, Claudia, like when you train, the next day what are you doing? You're recovering. So these supplements, like especially branched chain amino acids and high quality proteins, they're helping that recovery process. You know, that's when you adapt or on your off days. So supplements become very important.
Yeah, and certainly supplements like creatine, you know, every day to maintain the muscle stores that you need to help, you know, generate the power and the strength during your workouts. The casein at night, you know, every night you go through the same things each and every night. So casein at night, whether you work out that day or not.
And also on your rest days is when your body is actually changing, is in that repair. So it's equally as important, if not more important, to make sure that those off days you are loading your body up on those nutrients and keeping your diet on point.
I guess just to follow that question before we jump to the next one, are there any specific supplements you would recommend discontinuing on rest days off the top of your head? Anything that just jumps immediately in mind?
The only thing I would say is if you take like a carbohydrate supplement, like around your workouts, if you don't really need that energy on the off days. So more protein-based, amino acid-based supplements, recovery aids, that's what you're looking for on off days.
Awesome. Well, Rob basically answered this one, but I do want to dive into it because there's an interesting question at the end. So this question from Dave Kell has been upvoted, and it's basically about should creatine be taken every day, including off days, which you guys answered positively. But Dave basically said, I typically run on my off days. So that kind of active recovery on your off days, does that change off-day recovery supplementation for you?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. If the off days of recovery, one thing we know is that the one thing that interferes with recovery the most is running. So I would say for him, it's very important to keep taking your supplements on the off days, especially kind of the anti-catabolic type of agents, because, like I said, running interferes with resistance training adaptations.
Is that true for all intensities of running?
Well, okay, if what we found in our laboratory is that if you do sprinting, high-intensity sprinting, instead of running, you increase fat metabolism. In fact, you use more fat than you do with the low intensity. So if that's the goal, I'd recommend high intensity. And it also seems to stimulate muscle growth. We've actually found that sprinting literally increases the size of your quads. Mm-hmm. So we recommend that unless you're training for that sport or you really like running. If you're a physique athlete or a strength athlete, sprinting.
Yeah, so on that off day, the higher intensity running, you're going to get more bang for your buck.
Exactly.
On the low intensity front, is there a sweet spot in terms of duration? I mean, if somebody wants to do a low intensity jog for, say, 30 minutes, is that as negative as a low intensity jog for 60 minutes? You know, is there kind of a recommended range that doesn't impede recovery?
Well, you know, I think it just comes down to intensity. I mean, if it truly is a jog, and you know, I think when you look at the range of intensity, the higher the intensity, the more work on the muscle, the more the muscle is challenged. But when you get down into those lower intensities, like brisk walking, a very light jog, I think you start, you know, you're really just kind of burning more calories during that time. You're not overstimulating muscle. It's not going to be stimulated to adapt and change, and it's not really going to fatigue during that time. So the lower intensity endurance activities is really, you know, a weight management and calorie burning type of activity.
I think on rest days too, it's really important to make it. It shouldn't be a one size fits all, because it also is dependent upon the training regimen that each person individually is completing. So if you're doing something really high intensity, a lot of high impact exercises, you probably shouldn't be running on your off day because your body really needs to shut down and repair. You don't want to be doing something high impact. But I think people have to really get hip to tuning into their own body to say, hey, I'm running for 20 minutes and I'm exhausted. It's a rest day. I need to stop.
You know, one thing to talk about is if you when you go to the gym, you see on the treadmill the fat burning zone, right? Which is like what 65% of your heart rate max, right? So it's like, and I see a lot of people go, look, like, bro, you're telling me high intensity, but my heart rate's like at 100%, yeah. So there's no way that's going to work. Well, what we've actually found is you actually burn more fat long term when you do the high intensity, and what we found is that when you hit that 65% zone, the longer you go with that zone, the more muscle you lose, basically. The greater the decrements actually are. So like Dr. Rob said, if it's an active recovery thing and you're just like walking, that's cool, you know, or you're doing high intensity, great. As soon as you hit that fat burning zone, one, you're not optimizing fat metabolism long term, and two, you are causing the greatest interference the longer you go. With our research, we found that when you're at that, you don't ever want to go over 20 minutes. When you start going, the longer you go, the worse your gains become.
That's a great segue into our next question, which is about fat loss. And so I think each of you may have a slightly different approach here, and there's probably not going to be a definitive answer, but it does have a good specificity and a time frame. So this is from Bryant Worley. What is a good way to lose 20 pounds of fat while maintaining as much muscle as possible in 5 months? We got a 5-month window.
Seems like a lot of time.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems very, very doable.
Yeah, absolutely doable.
So, you know, I'll kick this off and then the others will jump in. I mean, you train at higher intensity. Even if you're doing your cardio, you still want to get in a higher intensity zone, whether it's high intensity interval training, or if you do your cardio. You know, I'm not a big fan of going out and doing cardio for 40 minutes, 60 minutes. You know, I would slide somebody back down into a higher intensity and try to get that done in about 10 to 20 minutes and really reap the benefits. You have to remember that when you push your cardiovascular training into a higher intensity, you engage more of the muscle fibers within that tissue, and it stimulates or challenges the muscle to adapt. So that muscle will adapt to become more aerobic, meaning that it's going to make more of the proteins that help the muscle burn more fat during that activity the next time you go out, as well as the time when you're recovering and when you're at rest. So the best chance that you have at burning more fat over the course of the day, as well as during exercise, is to condition the muscle to burn more fat. So higher intensity.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to emphasize, like, I see a lot of people, they'll go into the gym and they'll say, oh, I'm doing intervals, so 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, 30 seconds on, 30 for 20. If you're doing that, you're not doing the type of interval training that we're actually doing in the lab that's causing these great, tremendous results. when we're doing this type of sprinting, we're literally pushing people almost to failure on 30. If you can go longer than 30 seconds and you can recover in 30 seconds, you probably didn't do high intensity interval training. You just did kind of high intensity training, but not the hard. So you need to push yourself 10 to 30 seconds all out with maybe like 4 to 10 repetitions. That's what we've done in our lab. Just ask yourself, do I have anything more to give? And if you do, you might not be getting the same fat metabolizing effect. So it's got to be short and all out.
I think one of the things with fat loss, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is the first thing they do is they start cutting calories, cutting carbs, and then a lot of times overtraining. I see this all the time in LA. And that creates a really dangerous cycle because your body hits that wall, and then the only way to lose more weight is to continue to cut calories. The way that I've always approached things with fat loss is I want to do everything that's going to support your metabolism speeding up so that as your fitness levels get raised, we can actually introduce more calories into your diet. So that's going to help preserve the muscle tissue and help you lose weight. And I think from a psychological standpoint, people have trouble with weight loss because it means deprivation. And this is just something that I've dealt with so many times in my career where it's like, that's why the weight loss can't stick. So for each person, I agree with these guys, it's about high intensity training and then allowing your body to recover so that you can reach optimal hormone balance, because that's very important. If you're overtraining, your cortisol is going to go all over the map. Your body's going to want to store everything. So yeah, the right diet plan, high intensity exercise, and proper recovery.
Yeah, and Brian, one of the things I'm really happy with about your question, you already know your stuff because you're taking time to do it. Yeah. You have no idea how many times we get written like, lose 20 pounds in like a month.
Yes.
So, there's some research out of Norway by Dr. Garth, and what they found is basically the slower you lose weight, the more of it is fat. And then I know Dr. Rob's a proponent of this, but basically when you're dieting, you do start cutting calories, you don't want to cut your protein because that's what's going to spare your muscle mass the most. You're at a fight to spare that lean mass. It's very critical.
Awesome. Stellar answer, you guys. Well, this next one is another phenomenal question. This is from Emerson McAfee or McAfee. We talked about this morning. This is about high-quality protein supplementation. So the question is, how can I find good quality protein with the amount of shadiness that you see in the industry? Lots of powders are spiked with useless aminos, but it's tough to figure out which ones. And then there are questionable proprietary blends. So how do you, get good insight that what's in the bottle is actually what's on the label, and what should a consumer look for with purchasing a protein?
Yeah, I'll get that started. I think you're really touching upon it. You're becoming more savvy at reading the label. We can all get excited about the front of the package. It'll make a call out, 25 grams of protein per serving. Sounds great, weigh this, just calling out the protein type. But you really have to turn the product around. And when you move through the ingredient list, how short is that ingredient list? Is protein your first ingredient listed? And then after protein, do you go into things like flavors and sweetening systems, maybe some other things that will enhance the sensory properties. But once you begin to see additional amino acids such as glycine or taurine, and sometimes even glutamine, or if you see amino-based molecules like creatine, they're going to add nitrogen to the product. And when you test the product out in a laboratory, the nitrogen is nitrogen. So it's a way that some products can sort of inflate their protein claim but not have that level of protein. So you really got to just look at the label. If you have questions about it, every product should have the telephone number of the company or the website of the company that you can go to the Contact Us and just give them a call and say, hey, look, is this 100% protein? I see these other amino acids on there. If they're in there at small amounts, tell me how much of this is real protein, because that's what you think you're buying.
Yeah, and I'm sure like a lot of you guys out there have heard of leucine. We think leucine's like the major amino acid that drives skeletal muscle growth. And so what research seems to show is you need at least 2 to 3 grams of leucine to maximize muscle growth. So if you look at your protein serving, look for that. If there's like 0.5 grams of leucine and it's 25 grams of protein, there's a really good chance that you're nitrogen spiking that protein. So like Dr. Rob said, protein should be the #1 ingredient, then flavoring agents, and then 2, look at the leucine content.
Yeah, and it's important to realize that, you know, some amino acids may be added to sort of inflate a protein claim. Leucine isn't one of them. If a brand actually adds leucine, they may be trying to get to a strategic level of leucine because it triggers muscle protein synthesis. So, you know, the reality is leucine actually costs more than the protein that would be put into the product. So leucine isn't considered sort of a nitrogen spiker or an amino spiker because it's a very expensive ingredient. And so leucine can be sort of that mark for a high quality protein. So look for at least 2 grams and look for those products that specifically call out leucine on the package.
I think another really important point with the question is great, because for us as a brand, this is one of the major things that we want to address, and it's one of the major problems that we want to solve. You're absolutely right. There is a ton of shadiness in protein companies. One of the first things is you read the front of the label, it will say 100% whey protein isolate, and then you turn it around and it's not 100% whey protein isolate, it's cut with different forms of protein. The other thing that a lot of the companies are doing is they're putting things that are, it is hydrogenated oil, but they're calling it a diglyceride. Okay, so this supplement that's supposed to help your body recover is now filled with hydrogenated oil, creamers, artificial ingredients, all things that studies have shown can slow muscle recovery because it's not supposed to be in your body in the first place. And so when you're looking for a good protein powder, you need to make sure that you are reading the label and that the main ingredients are just protein. If you see a long list of stuff, it doesn't belong in the product.
I guess as a final follow-up there, and Rob, you may be able to speak to this, are there any particular consumer protection badges somebody should look for, like GMP? You know, are there particular call-outs somebody should look for on the label to show good manufacturing, or might show that a company has done their research and can, you know, prove the amount of aminos in their protein?
Well, I know that NSF is one of the associations that will look at the product and then will look to make sure the formulation and the label claim will sort of match up. Mm-hmm. But in general, not necessarily. It's really left up to the consumer to do their own homework and then also to kind of dig in themselves. So, you know, until we reach, you know, a new position on this where maybe there is a consumer mark where, you know, the product is evaluated and scrutinized against that, then you know, the consumer really is forced to do the simple things like look at the ingredients, look for something that looks odd. If it looks odd, it might be odd. And then also look for leucine, look for a specific leucine call out as a mark of the value or the quality of that protein.
Great answer. I hope that helps you guys become better protein detectives. Another stellar question coming up. This is from Reese Boudreau. What are your thoughts on fasted morning weightlifting? I feel I have some of my best and strongest workouts fasted in the morning, but is there anything against that? Now, a quick caveat, he also says he always eats shortly after his workout.
Jake, do you want to start that?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we need a lot more research as far as training fasted in the morning. A couple things I can tell you. One, if you don't have any nutrients in you, you are in what we call negative protein balance, so you are losing kind of muscle at that point. And I don't know you want to put yourself in that situation, but another thing is there's recent research that shows basically, you know, like say you go out, you know, I'm at a college, a university, and a lot of people at the university will go out on Friday night or Thursday nights. They call it Thirsty Thursdays, and you know, they'll go out and just like I'm gonna eat whatever I want. So they'll binge at night, drink, but they'll train real hard before they go out, and they think that's gonna negate the negative effects of that. But basically, recent research has showed that if you shift your calories to before your workout, there's far less chance of you storing that as fat. In fact, you'll be leaner. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the benefits of having your calories before you train. And then what we also know is that breakfast is one of the most important meals of the day. It's not just what your mom told you or your doctor. It actually is true. You can program your metabolism with breakfast. That's why I kind of recommend getting something in you before you train. You know, at least some branched chain amino acids or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I mean, because a lot of people want to train first thing in the morning and they don't want a lot of content in their stomach. They just want to get up, maybe have a little bit of coffee and go to the gym, train, and then enjoy a good breakfast or a protein shake or whatever that is. But you can't look beyond the metabolism. And everything Dr. Wilson said is, spot on. I mean, throughout the night, the metabolic shift in the muscle is that you are breaking down more muscle protein than you're making. So you are literally losing muscle throughout the night. If you continue that and then you train, you ramp up muscle protein breakdown, and muscle protein synthesis comes up as well. However, you just pretty much amplify the effect of the overnight with that training session. So you are doing something beneficial by consuming protein immediately after, but to really reap the benefits of that workout, it would be more beneficial for you if you could at least get some branched chain amino acids, or maybe a half serving of protein with a little extra branched chain amino acids immediately before your training. Reduce the content in your stomach so you don't feel a bloat or whatever the reason is for why you're not doing it, and just sort of turn around that muscle metabolism, have a great workout, and then attack it with more protein.
I think the other thing is that a lot of people, well, I'll say this, no one's ever come into the gym with me in the morning and done a workout on an empty stomach and been able to match their energy when they've had something to eat. So I think it depends on the intensity of the exercise that you're doing. I also second what these guys are saying with the BCAAs and all the research behind fasted exercise. But I think that the biggest reason that you're probably experiencing higher energy without the food is, depending on what you're eating for breakfast, your body has to use a lot of resources and blood to digest food. So if you're expecting to eat and then go into the gym 15 minutes later and have this killer workout, it's not going to happen. So a lot of times if clients are, let's say they've got a 7 a.m. training session, they're waking up at 6, I'll have them eat something small, or have something like a shake where your body's not having to work really hard to break it down, and generally that helps negate, and you're preserving muscle tissue, and you don't kind of have to worry about some of the negatives of coming in and weight training on an empty stomach.
Great answers, guys. Thank you. This next one is for the entire panel. Particularly good question. This is from Michael Manley. What is the biggest topic of research, not necessarily rehashed fads or trends, that's come out recently in the last 5 years or so in fitness or exercise, as well as nutrition supplementation? So kind of big key takeaways from the research world across the fitness spectrum.
There's a lot of big stuff that's come out.
This is a great question.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Great question, man. Awesome question. Number one is, like, I think the last couple of years is nutrient programming. One of the guys in my lab, Ryan Lowry, is doing a lot of research on this. What you eat for breakfast can program your metabolism the rest of the day. If you wake up, you have orange juice and cereal, you'll use carbs the rest of the day, irrespective of your total macronutrient content. So that's nutrient programming. Probably want to lower your carbs for breakfast. And then the other thing is, obviously this is one of the more controversial things of training, but like blood flow restriction training, that's one of the biggest things that's out there as far as new research. It's like, wow, this is brand new. This can make you grow. So those are two topics that we spent a lot of time on in our lab.
I would say, just to jump in as the moderator here, if you're interested in blood flow restriction training or occlusion training, which can be a little scary, I think, to the average gym goer, Jake does have a column on Bodybuilding.com, Ask the Muscle Prof, where he's addressed that topic a little bit, so you can learn a little bit more about it and try it safely. But yeah, neat area of research. Up to you guys.
Yeah, so I'll just add a little bit more to that. I mean, since you gave us a 5-year window, I think over the last 5 years, there's been some really fantastic research to help us understand the specific factors within protein that talk to muscle, that work with the signaling systems directly, while as a lot of the other amino acids that you find in a protein will serve more as building blocks for protein building. So we're talking primarily about leucine, and it's helping us understand why certain proteins may be more potent than others if taken at the same amount, and part of that explanation may be because differences in the leucine content of those proteins. Also, it's helping us understand that if a certain leucine threshold is hit, that really turns on or optimizes or triggers optimal muscle protein synthesis. So, I mean, for us, it's really exciting to know that there's a direct amino acid signaling factor that turns on or optimizes muscle protein synthesis in response to training, to the already elevated muscle protein synthesis caused by training, to optimize that. And then also with regard to meals as well. You still need to target that leucine after, during a meal to sort of optimize the muscle protein synthesis that's ramped up in response to that meal. Yeah, and I think the other area that's really exciting over the last few years is sort of this growing awareness or an awakening to many different applications of creatine. And so creatine, I mean, for decades now, for at least 2 decades now, it's lived in the bodybuilding and strength and power-oriented sport world. And that's where it is, and that's where the consumer perception is. Oh, it's just for bodybuilders. Oh, it's just for football players. But no, it seems to be for everybody. So the research in the area of creatine and daily intake of creatine may extend into neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's, may extend into cardiac strength and function, may extend into bone health and bone integrity later on in life, may extend into sarcopenia or age-related muscle and metabolic loss as we go through the progression of age. So the idea that creatine just isn't for bodybuilders, creatine isn't just for football players, that it may be one of the most important nutrients that we should all be taking throughout our lifetime, I think is a real eye-opener for a lot of us in the scientific community and really starting to reshape the way that we think about one of the most critical nutrients within our bodies.
I mean, for us at Clutch, the biggest thing that in the last 5 years, I don't know if there's been a ton of research that's popped up in the last 5 years, but kind of our area of interest is something that's not being talked about yet, which is adrenal health, and the way that stimulants play a part in depleting adrenals, spiking cortisol, and fluctuating hormones within the body. I think that 5-10 years ago, the industry was really all about like stimulant-based fat burn, or stimulant this, stimulant that, as a means to promote fat loss. And yes, that although caffeine is a great it's a great weapon to help lose fat, but one of the problems that I see is when you take into account somebody's overall lifestyle and the fact that they're waking up having 2 cups of coffee, that they're exhausted all day and running around, it's really about how much overall stress that people are under throughout their day, and then you're constantly hitting them with stimulants. And over time, that depletes the adrenals, and now you have everybody walking around in a fog, and it becomes this vicious cycle. The more tired you are, the more stimulants you take. And what I've seen personally in my own career training people is that they hit a wall where they can't lose any more weight, or maybe they're not able to put the muscle on properly. They're not able to build as easily. And when I send them in to get blood work, it's because now their hormones are off and their adrenals are off, and you have to now figure out a way to rebuild that. And so for us as a brand, we're really focused on creating products that work without the use of stimulants, because the reality is almost every person is taking them in every day outside of their supplements. So
awesome. Thank you, guys. Jake, I know you're holding yourself back from talking about HMB right now, but maybe we'll get to it later. I do have a great question from Colton Kaiser. This has been upvoted 8 times, so it seems to be a popular question on the Hangout. And it's a good one about nutrition and insulin. Someone told me that it's okay to eat as much fruit as you want without any consequences like insulin resistance caused by the sugar, because there's fiber in the fruit to even it out, besides, say, yellow or brown bananas. Is this true?
Jake, you want to start with that?
I think, the old saying that like too much of anything can be a bad thing. So fruit, yes. One of the things is that it's lower calorie density. It's very high in fiber. So you can have like a whole bowl of berries. Actually, Rob and I and Jeff O'Connell were talking about this at lunch today. Berries are like a superfood. You have a whole bowl of them, and maybe you only have like 14 grams of carbs, and like 8 of that is fiber. So can you get away with a larger amount of things like berries? Yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you eat like as much as you want of anything. So just use them as a tool. Use it to increase bulk. Use it to increase fiber. Antioxidants, vitamins. But obviously, anything put it in its place is what my advice would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just think it's a better choice versus for somebody who is concerned about insulin, who is maybe insulin sensitive, it's a better choice than a heavy starch item, just gram for gram. It's lower caloric density, it's going to be a lower sugar density than maybe, a piece of bread as it's digested down into its glucose monosaccharide units, which are going to directly stimulate insulin very potently. So, I think it's a nice alternative, certainly, for somebody who is, looking to make a good choice for health benefits, but at the same time not do it at the expense of heavily ramped up insulin response.
I agree with that. And the other thing with fruit, for me, is just I don't want someone who's working out and building up a lot of acid in their body to now be downing a bunch of fruit, which also is a very acidic food. When you talk about things like muscle recovery, you really want to bring that acid level down and make the body as alkaline as possible. And so I would never recommend somebody to go crazy with fruit. There's been a lot of diets out there that have said exactly what your question is. Hey, I can eat unlimited this or that. That's just never a good. Everything has to be in balance.
And one thing I want to emphasize is, like, with bodybuilding, with building a good physique, one of the major things that is controlling that is your satiety. We like to think like, oh, he just can't lose body fat, or she can't lose body fat because she can't push the spoon away or the fork away. But a lot of things are unconscious. Most of what we do, if you think about daily activity, is unconscious. It's just behavior. So if you select out foods that are higher in fiber, like fruit, like vegetables, you're going to be fuller, you're going to be more satiated, and you'll have a greater probability of, reaching your physique goals. So we definitely recommend this stuff. It's just like I said, everything in moderation.
Thank you, guys. I know we briefly talked about active recovery a little bit earlier, but this is sort of a more specific question from Alex Taylor. It's got 9 votes, so a more popular question. And he basically asks, after leg day, I normally perform some type of cardio immediately after my workout to prevent extreme soreness. Is this the right route to take? Is it better to go slow on my run, bike, or faster?
Great question. So this is an area that our lab's been spending a lot of intense research on, actually, is cardio and weights. One thing we know is that when you do cardio on the same day as weights, it interferes with the gains that you would make with weight training. So it's not as much active recovery as it is. Think about this for a second. If resistance training turns on the signal for muscle growth, cardio kind of turns it off. So it's like, oh, turn the signal, then turn it off. Probably, if you want to do, what I would recommend is maybe do like mobility work after you're done with a leg workout. You know what I mean? That's when you work on your mobility work and things like that. That's a good form of active recovery that's not going to interfere with the muscle growth. And actually, we found that maybe stretching after your workout could be a good time to place that. And enhance future workouts. So, probably I'd more focus on maybe mobility and getting nutrients than you have for weight.
That actually segues really well into another great question on here from Robert Lilquist. Basically, how important is stretching for muscle growth, and are there any specific stretches you recommend?
That's a phenomenal question, Robert. Great name, by the way.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I know that Dr. Wilson's lab has done a lot in stretch. So I think there's really 2 questions in here, and this is pre-exercise stretching and then stretching during exercise or during after a specific exercise itself. So I'll let Dr. Wilson open it.
Well, this is a real cool thing. Okay, so one of the guys I followed a lot when I was coming up, going through school, grad school, and stuff like that was Dr. Jose Antonio. And he actually did research where he saw the most muscle growth. This is actually in animal models. He saw the most muscle growth I've ever seen out of any study to date. And what he did was he chronically stretched the muscle, and it just grew. And it just grow in size. You actually created new muscle fibers. So I was like, this is something interesting. Then we saw new research from my colleagues where they took a muscle fiber in isolation, stretched it, and it increased protein synthesis. There's something about stretching. What it is, it's mechanical stress. It's a mechanical stressor. So couple things, and Dr. Rob talked about this about pre-workout stretching, intra-workout stretching. One of the things we know from research is that if you're doing a strength day, say you're doing heavy leg day, Robert, so you want to maximize your performance. If you stretch before or even during that leg workout, you're not going to be able to lift as heavy. The research is absolutely clear on that. If you're stretching before or during, you're not going to be able to lift as heavy. But if your focus that day is more hypertrophy, high volume, which is like muscle growth, then you're gonna have short rest periods. You're not worried about how much you can lift, and that's where stretching can be important. So our lab, a couple guys in our lab, Jeremy Silva, Jacob Roush, Ryan Lowry, did this study where basically we had people stretch intensely between sets. So they did calf raises. So basically you do calf raises, and in between you're only just resting. Well, we had one group basically let the weight stack keep their muscle on stretch in between sets. Now their volume lowered, like they couldn't lift as much, but they actually gained muscle at the end of the study. And I would definitely challenge you to try this out. It's going to be one of the most challenging things you've ever done. Like try doing legs, like high rep leg press, and then stretching your quads in between sets. The blood pump is insane, and that may actually be causing growth. And then the sort of the damage and the mechanical stress, you will grow like crazy. It's a great plateau breaker.
Sticking on muscle growth and hypertrophy, this is a good general question. What would you guys consider the best split to gain muscle? And there are a few specific options here. Train every muscle group twice a week, or train each muscle group once with more rest?
I think for me, I don't ever lock someone into this is the formula for that, because I really believe in muscle confusion. So if I have somebody lifting, let's say doing a chest back split and then splitting it whatever else up the rest of the week, 3 weeks later I'm going to change their split, because I don't want their body to ever get patterned for chest back. It knows what's coming. So I may go from chest back to then having them do something like chest, shoulders, biceps even. So your shoulders are just getting pounded that day. I think that's a very old school methodology. I'm not negating that it works, because I do believe it works. Locking yourself into a certain split. I've seen in my own experience as a trainer with people who have a very short period of time to transform their body, that constantly changing what you're doing within your training is the most important thing outside of diet.
One thing I always tell my students, if you had an exam, would you think you'd optimize performance on an exam by studying as hard as you can and pulling all night the day before, right? So no, you do better spreading out throughout the week. So first thing I want to emphasize this, like Ashley said, if you don't have a plan, it's a plan to fail. That means you need to periodize. So the number one thing for muscle growth and strength is you need to have a structured plan. It can't always be the same. It has to change. It has to vary. That's absolutely number one. But one of the questions that you had was frequency. And what I'm going to tell you is going to kind of blow your mind, but but yeah, it happened. Ronstad out of Norway did this study. They took high-level powerlifters, and they were benching and squatting and deadlifting 3 times a week, and they took their same volume. So say they're doing 10 sets 3 times a week on each of those body parts. They split that up so they were doing it 6 days a week. They gained far more muscle and far more strength. Now, who do you think ever tell you to train each body part 6 days a
Exactly.
week? But that's what the research shows. But if you were to do that every day for the next 2 years, you're going to overreach. And that's where you need to program and periodize and cycle and train between very high frequency days to low frequency weeks.
Yeah, no, I think all that's spot on, and I think in the practical world too, I think a lot of times people overestimate how hard they're training, and they may not train as much as they think they are. And a good maybe a rule of thumb is how quickly can you get back into the gym and train those same muscle groups with a comparable level of intensity and have the same workout. If you can do that again in 2 days after, 3 days after, you may not be training as hard as you think. So just really be brutal when you evaluate your own training protocol. Make sure you have a plan.
And that's a great point too, is when you get into training, if you're 4 weeks into a program and it's really taxing on your body, I think one of the mistakes that people make is they'll get a program and they just follow it blindly. And you really have to be in tune to what your body is telling you. Like if you lift, chest and legs one day and it's chest and legs day again, and you go into the gym and you are super weak, your body is still fatigued, shut it down. You don't have to go back in and retrain it. I think that's a big mistake. I see people do it all the time where they don't actually allow their body enough time to rest. It puts an insane amount of stress on the joints. And people then get 8 weeks into a training program, their body's destroyed. I played basketball at USC, and that was one of the big things. When you got done within a 12-week program, you took time off from the gym completely to let your body repair. So
yeah, and you can program them into your split. There's a little trick. It's called step loading. Basically, you start off low, say like moderate volume, and then the next week you up that volume to more frequency, more volume. The third week you kill yourself, and then you plan it and you back off to low volume. You recover and you start over, but next time it's a little bit higher intensity. So like 1, 2, 3, and then start here 1, 2, 3, and you're trying to get closer to your genetic potential with each block.
All right, guys, going to dive into another supplement question. You guys may think of this in terms of specific applications, but just broadly, from Christian Ruiz, what do you think is the most underrated supplement? Most underrated? And if you've got a couple,
I think the most underrated is a multivitamin. I think so often I watch people step in, and let me just preface this by saying there are a lot of problems with multivitamins, just like there is with protein. But if you can find a good multivitamin, I think that's one of the areas that gets severely overlooked in anyone's program. They'll dive into all these high-performance supplements before actually setting a really solid foundation. I think the other one is electrolytes. People go in and they do really high-intensity cardio, and they don't replenish those electrolytes, and they're wondering why they're so fatigued. And it's like those small nutrients in the body, when they're depleted, can lead to huge problems. And then we try and cover it again with things like stimulants, or we're constantly kind of battling against. So I see things like multivitamins, electrolytes, BCAAs, glutamine as like the baseline. If you're going to invest $100 into supplements, you need to just make sure that you're also covering the things that are like absolutes within any training and nutrition program before you move on to kind of all of these other things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. A lot of times we're very focused on more of the high-profile nutrition supplements. There's a lot of focus on protein. There's ongoing focus on creatine, beta-alanine, and so forth and so on. But you still have to drill down to, sort of the bread and butters, if you will, over, that you would take on a daily basis, like a good multivitamin, even omega-3. I mean, there's a lot of compelling research coming out on omega-3 fish oil that, it in response to a meal, it helps optimize muscle protein synthesis. In response to a meal, I mean that's just phenomenal there, that it may play a role in modulating testosterone production, and I mean just new ways that we're beginning to try to understand what fish oil does in our body. Vitamin D is another one that I think is vastly overlooked. So I think once you start to look beyond the high profile ones, some of the ones that maybe aren't as
glamorous.
Yeah, like glamorous, sort of that superstar profile may be, just absolutely fundamentally important that we may be overlooking.
Yeah, one thing I like that Ashley brought up was this whole stress issue. Thinking that our bodies are handling all these stressors. You're hitting it with weight training. You have your stressors in life. You have relationship stressors. And so it's probably some of the top supplements are stimulants. Well, one of the things I think that's overlooked is sleep. So we really need to be looking at how can we optimize sleep, because that's when you recover. We know that if you have a poor night's sleep, you wake up the next day and you're insulin resistant, you're hungry, you're more likely to store fat. So really, supplements like magnesium before bed is a lot of research showing that actually helps. Vitamin D actually helps with the onset of sleep. And then supplements that, again, buffer stress. I'm a huge believer in like the sort of sports psychology background of things. How you appraise things is very important. How you approach things, how you handle stress is important. But some supplements actually help with stress. Like two of my colleagues, Dr. Ralph Yeager and Dr. Martin Perper, have done a lot of research on what's called phosphatidylserine. It's not super popular, but phosphatidylserine helps you buffer stress. And it's so when you're in these situations of stress, everyone's got a hard life. People have hard jobs. You want to lower that so your body can recover.
Awesome, thank you guys. Well, we've got kind of a scatter of questions now about lagging body parts and muscular imbalances on both the YouTube version of the page as well as the Hangout. So I'm just going to grab one here, and I think it will hopefully cover a variety of them. This is from John Pierce, who says, arms are my lagging body part. Should I do intensive arm workouts every day to get maximum pump, or stagger them? And what is the right spacing of intensive workouts to maximize growth? So more generally, what's the best approach to bring up a lagging body part?
Well, going back to what Ashley said, it's got to be planned, it's got to be periodized. So one of the things is if we try to be good at everything at once, we're going to fail at all those things, or be mediocre or not very good at all of them. So what periodization does is you program your split so you're focusing on certain body parts, you know? So if it's like, you know, I have weak arms, yes, you're going to need to emphasize those. Your frequency is going to have to be higher, but you can't do the same thing every workout. You can't go in there and go, I'm going to go 8 to 12 reps, 30, 60 seconds rest, supersets every workout. It doesn't work that way. What you think about it is you're stressing different systems. So we know there are different ways muscle grows. There's mechanical stress, that's lifting heavy. There's metabolic stress, that's things like supersets. There's cell swelling, that's things like blood flow restriction. Well, how you program that is you might start the week with a heavy day, you know, on Monday. Wednesday, if you're sore and still beat up, do something that's not going to cause more damage, like blood flow restriction. And then Friday, you should be recovered. Then you can hit a high volume hypertrophy day, you know. And then you get to maybe take the weekend off and then come back around and kind of repeat something like that. The point is that you can do more frequency when you're varying the workouts within your training split. It's called like daily undulating periodization.
Scientific term.
Yes.
Yes, it's a scientific term.
Well, this next one's another specific question, but a lot of people have voted it up, so I think it's a fairly common problem or, you know, common hurdle people face. This is from Francisco Hernandez, who says, I'm a 26-year-old male. I work out 5 to 6 times a week. I eat relatively clean. I take basic supplements, protein, creatine, BCAAs, and a pre-workout. I've definitely been getting stronger, but the mirror doesn't change. Any suggestions?
I would say what's happening with your nutrition program probably needs to change. I think, again, one of the biggest kind of like myths or misconceptions in fitness is a one size fits all. What works for my body diet-wise is not going to work for every single person on the planet. And so you really have to kind of get dialed in. When clients come in to see me, I have a basic plan that has always worked for me in the past, but every client, I usually do something a little bit different. If I see that something I'm doing isn't getting the results that I want, maybe I change it. Maybe I'm swapping out the carbohydrate source, or I'm swapping out their macronutrients. Maybe I'm front-loading their carbs in the morning and I'm tapering them off at night. Some people respond to different placement of carbohydrates in different sources completely differently, and so I would just encourage you to really dial in the nutrition side of things and really start trying maybe some different things. For me personally, I saw some of the biggest changes in my own body when I actually cut out things like gluten and milk. That made a massive change. Some people's bodies aren't like that. So it's kind of like you have to not just trust blindly what everyone is telling you to do. You also have to do that experimentation yourself and kind of unlock your own personal code and whatever that may be for you.
Yeah, I think now's a good time for experimentation. I mean, you have a clear understanding of where you are right now, and you have an idea of where you want to go. So what's going to get you there? You can make changes to your nutritional intake, and everything that was just mentioned is spot on. So you can dial back your carbohydrates, see if that begins to make a difference, but you're going to have to do that over a significant period of time. Maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you begin to understand if it's moving you in the direction that you want to go. I think this is also a really good time to reevaluate your training program, because a lot of times the nutrition that you mentioned will have the best response in your body as you train. So it may be that you have to take your training up or vary your training a little bit more to give the nutrition, the supplementation that you talked about, a better chance to help amplify those effects.
Yeah, and one of the things these guys talked about, and actually Jacob Worms in my lab's really good at this, is be your own scientist.
Yeah.
You need to take measurements, like objective measurements. Like the mirror is great. It's one of the best measurements you could do, but skin folds, doing all those things. But the other thing I want to say is, if you look at bodybuilding, one of the things that separates it from other sports is, if you look at other sports, people are peaking in their early 20s. If you look at bodybuilding, they're peaking 30s, late 30s. Why? Because it takes so long to put on muscle. I mean, it's just the way it is. So you're young. A lot of this just keep putting your work in, keep taking those measurements. It may come in inches. It may come in, centimeters. But if you keep monitoring yourself and tracking yourself, you'll see those changes, and you'll learn how your body sort of adapts. But again, muscle is a long process. I wish it were faster. I really do. But it takes time.
Thank you, guys. We've got roughly 10 plus a few more minutes left, so I'm going to try and capture some questions here that are fairly broad and have a lot of interest. And this one's been voted up quite a bit, and it's a pretty trending topic right now. So from Greg Towers, what are your opinions on if it fits your macros or the IIFYM diet?
Okay, great question. And also probably one of the more controversial questions. You'll have guys on one side of the fence, like basically everyone thinks it's like, okay, either or. You know what I mean? The people who are like, oh, if it hits your macros, I can eat Pop-Tarts or pizza, ice cream. Like, it's stupid to be like the other people, like all they eat is asparagus and tilapia. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily true. What I will tell you is that basically the concept, if it fits your macros, is that as long as you hit a certain macronutrient range, however you get there doesn't matter. What I can tell you is that I think if someone's starting off in their training, or you want to get someone to switch over to certain diets and change their body composition, that could be a good introductory phase. But as we become more advanced, we do know that how you distribute your nutrients, what type of basically sources you get, do make an impact on body composition. Look at protein. There is a ton of research showing that the quality of protein makes a difference. Yeah. Even if you get the same macronutrients. Like I said, in our lab, we've shown that how you distribute your nutrients makes a difference. So if you have lower carbs with breakfast and have them more towards as the day goes on, you actually use more fat, irrespective of how many carbohydrates you have. So I'd say it's a good starting point, but as you start to hit a plateau, you're going to need to focus more on distribution, quality, and things of that nature. So think of it as a continuum sort of along your career.
For me, I think of things in regards to this. It's just, how is our body meant to be fueled? How is our body intended to be fueled? How are we designed? And we were not designed to eat the crap that all these food manufacturers are making, period, especially if you're putting your body under the stress of these intensive workouts. It doesn't matter. The thing that matters is what is going to happen inside your body when it receives that food. And eating things that are high processed, Pop-Tarts, like whatever it may be, back when our bodies were designed, that's not what was intended, and therefore the implication of that food, once it's inside your system, your body's not going to be able to grab any nutrients from it. It's an empty calorie food. So now you have a scenario where you're placing all this stress on the body. You want to get results, whether it's burning fat or building muscle, and your body can't grab nutrients from anywhere. That's literally setting you up to fail, regardless of goal. So I do, like when a client comes in, I believe eating clean like 5 or 6 days a week, and then allowing them once a week to eat what they want, whether it's pizza, cake, whatever. Science has shown that not only does that help kind of give your metabolism a boost and boost growth hormone and testosterone, it's also great psychologically. I think that when you go into any sort of program and you think, yeah, I have to eat asparagus and whitefish for the rest of my life, people are going to fail before they even begin, because that's just not realistic. But certainly we have to be reasonable with how our body is supposed to be fueled, and empty calories is not a part of that.
All right, guys. A few questions left. Just going to grab some quick ones, so we'll kind of go into a lightning round and just fire out your favorite or best answers. How many days of the week is the best for training abs? This is from 10 people, started by Diego Mata Vega. How many days a week for training abs?
Wow. I mean, for a lot of people, it seems to be that they'll do it every time they work. Whether they split their workouts or whatever, they'll throw abs in there as well. So I think it really comes down to how hard are you training your abs, how many exercises, how much volume is there, how taxed are they, how well you're recovering. If you're coming back and you're doing abs the next day and you can barely do a crunch, you got to back off.
Yeah.
And that's what I see more than a lot. I think a lot of times people like overtax their abs and work them incredibly hard, and then they come back and try to work them again very aggressively. Yeah, so that would be my...
You've got to be just careful with abs, because one of the things that I see a lot is people doing exercises that put a lot of stress on your hip flexors. And so you just kind of have to be cognizant. You know, if you're getting a lot of tightness through your hips, your low back is starting to hurt, you really need to take the time to stretch, and that's one of the things that gets overlooked. I have clients train abs about 5 days a week, but they're also stretching. They're also using the foam roller. They're doing everything they need to do to make sure that they're also, as they're constricting the muscles and as they're working the muscles, are also lengthening them, which is extremely important because it's the center of your body. You need to keep everything moving properly.
All right, thanks, guys. This is from Bernie Lasowski. We talked a little bit about supplementing around your workout, para-workout supplementation earlier, but this is a specific one that a lot of people like. How should I supplement nutrition for a very early morning workout? Start at 5 a.m. using a pre-workout supplement only, is I think his current approach. So what should he tweak there? What should he take?
Dr. Rob's got a nice cocktail.
Yeah, no, early morning workouts are a challenge, I think, because a lot of times people don't want to, they're not going to have a meal or whatever. So a lot of pre-workouts are great choices, and what are you targeting in a pre-workout? You're targeting energy, focus, concentration, but also, especially early in the morning, you got to prime your muscle. Mm-hmm. So you definitely want to choose something that is going to deliver branched-chain amino acids at the very least. So I think that has to be in there as well. So things that I really like first thing in the morning, pre-workout, are going to be like beetroot or pomegranate extract. I like citrulline. I like branched-chain amino acids. Get them in there at least, maybe 5 grams. If you're not going to eat, if you're not going to have protein prior to that, I think that's an absolute necessity. I love the idea of creatine monohydrate before I train as well. The reality is when you train hard, the blood is surging to that muscle, and the muscle is becoming incredibly receptive to nutrients during that training session. So it's the ideal time to get a lot of those key nutrients into your muscle, whether it be, creatine or beta-alanine, branched chains, or even other amino acids. There's a lot that you can put in there.
All right. Any particular weapons in the fat loss arsenal? So this question is from Emily. What supplements are recommended for fat burning or weight loss? Any key ingredients to help in that fight you guys would recommend?
Yeah, I'll start.
There's a ton. There's like a lot.
There's just so much, and but I think a lot of times when we focus on fat and fat oxidation, it's mobilization of fat, and then it's actual oxidation of fat within the muscle tissue or other tissue. A lot of this is going to work when the muscle itself is either hypermetabolic or engaged in beta oxidative processes. So I think any fat burning strategy has to live on top of a good solid exercise program that includes higher intensity training. So I think your first item in your arsenal is your exercise program. Then on top of that, caffeine will help increase metabolism. But some of the research that we've done and that others have done haven't always shown that even though your metabolism is increased, that it's all coming from fat metabolism. A lot of times you're actually just increasing carbohydrate utilization as you ramp up metabolism. So it's not a clear, oh, metabolism is up and it's all coming from extra fat. That's not always the case with caffeine.
Mm-hmm. I think the nutrition component as well. I think that, we can talk about like green tea and caffeine and all that stuff till we're blue in the face, but I think the biggest thing that kind of gets overlooked again is what are you doing with your nutrition program? Because if that is not dialed in, guess what? It doesn't matter what supplement you're taking. It may make a small difference, but you can't think that if you talk about the thermic effects of food. Certain foods raise your metabolic rate. How you're spacing your meals out, again, affects your metabolic rate. So it's like you have to dial those things in first, and I really believe look at supplements as a weapon to kind of accelerate the groundwork that you're already laying, not if I take this magic ingredient, I'm going to see these incredible fat burning results, because it's just not the case.
Yeah, and I think protein is really, really important. That when you stack up a gram of carbohydrate, a gram of protein, and a gram of saturated fat, protein is by far and away the most thermogenic. Meaning that your body is just burning more calories to process the protein. Higher protein intakes, and Jake and I were talking about this earlier today, that a lot of times we're taught that protein just raises metabolism, because your body is processing all the amino acids and taking care of the nitrogen. But there's something in addition to that, that if you get your protein intake high enough and you get enough leucine, it's actually triggering muscle protein synthesis. So you're burning extra calories as your muscle is making more protein, as well as the processing of extra amino acids. So, it's a more strategic macronutrient if you're trying to metabolize more fat in your body.
Yeah, and anything that's going to spare muscle while you're dieting is going to be one of your biggest things.
Absolutely.
So, I had to throw it out there, HMB.
There it is.
Got it. We know when you're dieting, that actually increases like mitochondria in the muscle. It'll actually help you to use fat, and it spares muscle when you're dieting and training hard. So I definitely recommend that. Like these guys talked about leucine, protein. We actually published a study, Jeremy Linecky and I, in Nutrition Metabolism Journal, where we saw the more times per day you hit your leucine threshold, the leaner you were. So, and the reason why is because when you have a high quality protein, when you have leucine, you stimulate protein synthesis that makes the muscle work, that expends energy, and that actually stimulates your muscle to increase fat burning machinery like mitochondria. So, probably having meals and branched chain amino acids between meals could actually be beneficial for fat metabolism.
Yeah, so like green tea, green coffee bean, HCA, hydroxycitric acid, so forth and so on. I mean, it should be viewed as sort of stacks, on top of higher protein intakes, a good structured training program that includes higher intensity training. And then, you can experiment with those to see if they add additional benefit. But don't look for them to do it all by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, this is the last question, and I'm going to grab this one because we're already on the topic, and there are a few versions of it. What is the optimal amount of protein to increase strength, physique, and athletic performance overall? Optimal daily amount. What is the threshold or upper limit, and are there negative side effects? I assume at that limit.
Well, one of the things that Dr. Rob and I talked about earlier today is, if you think about most recommendations, they're based on a 24-hour period, as if like protein is regulated purely on a 24-hour period. In reality, it's regulated every time you eat. And so we need to focus on is how much protein should you get in a single meal, and that's going to be based on the leucine content. So you need 2 to 3 grams of leucine. If you have whey protein, it's like 11% leucine. So you might only need like 20 grams. If you have chicken, it might be 7 to 8% leucine or 7.5% leucine, so you might need to get 30 to 40 grams of that. Beef, same thing. You probably need like maybe 40 grams compared to whey 20 grams. So it depends on the quality and how rapidly that protein is digesting. So it's going to be anywhere from 20 to 40 grams depending on how fast it digests. The slower digesting, the more you'll need. The quality of it, the more quality, the less you'll need. And then how frequently should you consume your meals, which is going to be every couple hours, probably every 3 to 4 hours. So that's going to determine how much protein you should have in a single day. But I know Dr. Rob feels, and I agree 100% with him, that there are other benefits.
Yeah, because there's beyond muscle. So there's muscle, which is sort of the ante for protein. So we always think of muscle, how much protein do I? Because the question really is, what's the minimal amount of protein do I need for my muscle benefits to be optimized from training? Okay, but there's additional things that protein will do beyond maximizing muscle protein synthesis over the course of the day and reaping the benefits of your training session. It is the most satiating of the energy nutrients, so it can be used strategically to help you control your appetite, especially those of us who are trying to control their caloric intake or trying to control their body weight over time. Also, it is the basis for recovery. So if you are training hard, you will need more protein in addition to the minimal muscle amounts to effectively, recover, repair, so forth. If you're a contact-related sport athlete, if you're dealing with abrasions, I mean, all of these are going to require protein. Muscle is key in hair, skin, and nails. So, it's the beauty nutrient, if you will, if you want to look at it, in that regard. And it's the most thermogenic. So it may substitute for other nutrients in your body strategically, so you burn more calories throughout the day. No nutrient is going to work harder for you than protein, and we're just in this incredible time right now where protein is accepted, and it's this sought-after nutrient versus 20 years ago when it was sort of left behind, and you had to be careful not to get too much because it would, your bones would leach out calcium, and your kidneys would shut down. It's crazy, but that was only about 20 years ago. Now we realize that people need more throughout their lives than what we're recommending for, just basic needs. And the benefits really kind of, reach out in several different areas that make our lives better.
All right, guys. Well, that's our time. So thank you so much. Again, just to go down the line, in the blue, Dr. Rob Wildman, Ph.D. nutritionist. Next to him is Ashley Conrad, a celebrity trainer. And, of course, Dr. Jake Wilson, Ph.D. in skeletal muscle physiology. If you want to learn more about these guys, all of them have articles here on Bodybuilding.com. Jake runs a column called Ask the Muscle Prof and is also part of Aaron Stern's Elite Body Trainer. Ashley has a series of articles as well as the Clutch Cut Trainer, which is a 21-day fat loss program. And Rob has contributed a number of specific and detailed nutrition articles on anything from caffeine to pomegranate and their athletic and performance benefits. So thank you guys again for tuning in. We hope to do this again in the future and more frequently. I know we didn't get to a lot of the questions out there, but we sincerely appreciate you watching, and we'll try to cover some more the next time around. Again, off the camera, my name is Chris Ellery. I'm the deputy editor of Bodybuilding.com, and we sincerely appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.